On your first day at any company, someone hands you an org chart. It shows who reports to whom, who sits above whom, where the decisions come from, and where they go. It is the most professionally produced lie you will ever be handed. Not because the names are wrong, but because the chart describes a company that doesn't exist. Every organization runs on two structures simultaneously, the one they print and the one that actually works. You felt this, without being able to name it. You send an email to the right person, the one the org chart says is responsible, and nothing moves. But when someone else mentions the same thing in passing to someone at a completely different level, it gets done in 48 hours. You watch a colleague with no senior title walk into a room with the CFO and walk out with a decision that took your entire team 3 weeks to get through formal channels. You see a manager who technically outranks 3 people, but nobody routes problems through them. Everyone goes around, and you ask yourself, what does this person actually know that I don't? The answer is not a skill. It is not a secret. It is a map. They have learned to read the real org chart, the one that exists in the relationships, the trust networks, and the informal influence structures that every company builds over time, whether it intends to or not. MIT Sloan research published in 2023 found that informal influencers inside organizations are 2.5 times more effective at driving behavior change than formal managers. 2.5 times. What I'm going to walk you through comes from 3 decades of research on how organizations actually function. Rob Cross and Andrew Parker published their foundational research on informal networks in the MIT Sloan Management Review. In 2002, David Krackhart and Jeffrey Hansen published their landmark Harvard Business Review study on informal networks in 1993. And Jeffrey Pfeffer at Stanford has spent 4 decades documenting what formal authority structures actually hide. None of this is opinion. It is organizational science. Here is what it shows. The modern org chart was invented in 1855. Daniel McCallum, general superintendent of the New York and Erie Railroad, needed a way to visualize who was responsible for what across a company that was too large to manage by direct observation. His solution was a tree diagram showing formal reporting lines. It answered one question: who is accountable to whom on paper? It was never designed to answer who actually influences whom in practice. Those are completely different questions, and most organizations have treated them as the same question ever since. Krackhart and Hansen's 1993 research established that every organization actually runs 3 separate networks simultaneously. The advice network, who people go to when they need help solving a problem. The trust network, who people share sensitive or political information with. The communication network, who people actually talk to on a regular basis to get work done. The formal org chart captures none of these. It only captures the reporting lines, which is the least useful of all 4 networks for understanding how the company actually functions. McKinsey's State of Organizations 2023 found that 2/3 of companies describe themselves as overly complex and inefficient. The complexity is not in the formal chart. It is in the gap between the formal chart and reality. The next time you join a company or move to a new team, the org chart is not your map. It is your starting point. Your first 3 months should be spent identifying the 3 real networks: who people go to for advice, who they trust with political information, and who they actually talk to daily to get things done. Those 3 maps will tell you more about how power moves in that company than 6 months of formal observation. Every company has people who appear nowhere near the top of the org chart, but who effectively control how the company moves. They are not always the CEO's assistant. They are not always the longest-serving employee. They are not always the most senior person in a room. They are the people who sit at the intersection of multiple networks at once. Researchers call these people central nodes. In practical terms, they are the people who know what is happening across departments before anyone has put it in a report. They know which budget decision is being reconsidered before the finance meeting. They know which executive is losing internal support before the restructure is announced. They know which project is quietly being deprioritized before anyone has been officially told. They know because information flows to them, not because of their title, but because they have built trust across enough of the network that people tell them things. Balkundi and Harrison's research, published in the Journal of Applied Psychology, found that teams perform significantly better when key members sit at the center of the team's social network, not just at the top of the formal structure. In disruption and uncertainty specifically, people do not look at the org chart to decide who to follow. They look for the person who feels safest, the person they trust, the person at the center of the network. Sometimes that is the official leader. Research suggests it very often is not. The person who actually runs your company may have a title you have never noticed. They are identifiable by one specific behavior. People seek them out. Not just peers, seniors, juniors, cross-functional colleagues. If you watch who people root their problems through when things are uncertain, you are watching the real org chart draw itself in real time. That person is more worth knowing than whoever sits at the top of the printed chart. There is a specific category of person inside every large organization who appears on the org chart with a modest title and who effectively controls access to the entire floor above them. Executive assistants, chiefs of staff, office coordinators, senior administrative leads. These are the people who manage the calendar of every person at the top of the formal hierarchy, which means they decide who gets access, when, for how long, and in what context. The difference between your idea reaching the CEO in a 5-minute hallway conversation versus a formal presentation deck to a committee, that difference is often determined by this person. Executive assistants to C-suite executives handle confidential matters, prepare board materials, manage communications across time zones, and serve as the primary filter for everything that reaches the executive above them. They know the executive's real priorities, not the stated ones. They know when the executive is under pressure. They know which relationships matter and which are being managed at a distance. The formal org chart places this person several levels below the executive they support. The real org chart places them directly adjacent to the highest concentration of formal power in the building. Those are not the same position, and treating them as the same position is one of the most common and costly political mistakes ambitious professionals make. The executive assistant to whoever controls your career is one of the most important professional relationships you can build in any company. Not transactionally, not to manipulate access, but genuinely. They know more about what matters to that executive than most of that executive's direct reports. Treat them as the intelligent, influential professional they are, because that is exactly what they are. Here is a specific way the gap between the formal and informal org chart costs ordinary professionals directly. A formal approval process at a large company might show 4 people: the CEO, a VP, a department head, a budget controller. The real approval path for the same decision might involve 9 people: legal advisors who are not on the org chart for this decision, but whose informal sign-off is required; a finance analyst, 3 levels below the budget controller, who is the person who actually builds the model the controller will rely on; a project manager in an adjacent team whose cooperation is essential, but whose objection has never been formally acknowledged; and a peer of the decision maker who has no formal authority over the decision, but whose opinion carries significant weight in how the decision maker votes. In practice, most organizations never map those informal dependencies, which means most professionals submit proposals into a process they do not understand, and then wonder why things that seem approved keep dying. They are not dying in the formal process. They are dying in the informal one. In the hallway conversation the finance analyst had with the budget controller before the meeting. In the fact that the adjacent project manager was never consulted and mentioned their concern informally to someone, who mentioned it informally to someone else. The formal meeting is where decisions are announced. The informal network is where they are made. Before you submit any significant proposal, map the real approval path, not the official one. Ask yourself, who will build the analysis this decision rests on? Who needs to not object for this to move? Who has the ear of the person who formally approves it? Those people need to see your proposal before the meeting where it will be approved. Winning the informal conversation first is how the formal vote becomes a formality. Here is the practical method for reading the real org chart anywhere you work. It does not require a network analysis tool. It requires 3 months of deliberate observation. First, watch where problems go when they cannot be solved through official channels. The person whose desk problems land on, the person colleagues route around the formal hierarchy to reach. That person is a central node. Mark them. Second, watch who gets pulled into meetings they were not originally invited to. When a decision is being made and someone's name comes up as someone who should be in the room, even though they are not officially part of the process, that person has informal authority over that type of decision. Mark them. Third, watch who gets told things before they are formally communicated. The person who seems to always know what is about to happen before the announcement, they are inside the trust network, the most important network of all. Fourth, watch who can stop something without formally blocking it. The person who never appears in the approval chain, but whose lack of cooperation causes projects to stall. They have veto power in the informal network. Knowing who they are before you start a project is the difference between 6 weeks and 6 months. 5 people, identified over 3 months of observation. That is your real org chart. And once you have it, you have something most of your colleagues spend entire careers never finding: a map to how the company actually works. Let's come back to where we started. On your first day at any company, someone hands you an org chart, and it is not a lie exactly. The names are right, the titles are right, the reporting lines are real. What it does not show you is where the problems go when the official path fails. It does not show you who controls access to the people at the top. It does not show you the 9 people who are actually involved in a decision the chart says involves 4. And it does not show you the person 2 levels below the VP title who has been the real center of this team's trust network for 7 years. The formal org chart tells you what the company wants you to see. The real org chart tells you how to actually navigate it. Learning the difference is not a political move. It is basic professional literacy. Next week, we go inside the question nobody asks in a performance review. Why does your manager's manager have no idea what you actually do? The answer has nothing to do with communication. It has to do with how information is designed to travel upward and what gets filtered out before it arrives. Subscribe. The next map is more useful.